One fork, that is all it took. Use the wrong fork at a Victorian dinner table and you would never be invited back. No one would tell you why. No one needed to. The women at that table already knew, and they would make sure everyone else knew too. London, 1880, and the rules were already watching you. For decades, Victorian high society built a system so precise, so deliberately cruel, that women who had studied the rules their entire lives could still be quietly destroyed by a single wrong gesture. But here is what history doesn't put in the pretty paintings. These rules were not about elegance. They were not about civilization. They were a trap, carefully designed, quietly profitable, and the women enforcing them most viciously were the same women who had been destroyed by them before. London, 1882. A formal dinner at a house on Grosvenor Square. 9 courses, 47 pieces of silverware, candles that cost more than a seamstress earned in a month. The guests arrive. Not at 8 o'clock, never at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock was for servants. 8 o'clock meant you had nowhere more important to be. The correct arrival time was 8:15 to 8:20, not because anyone was busy, because arriving on time was considered the first signal of someone who did not truly belong. The women at that table had known this since childhood. No one had written it in any book. So why did women follow rules this absurd? The answer that sold thousands of etiquette books was simple: elegance, refinement. The natural expression of a civilized woman who understood her place. That is what the conduct manuals said. That is what mothers repeated to daughters before their first season. But that answer is wrong, because elegance was never the point. The point was a system that could eliminate any woman at any moment for any reason while appearing to simply be maintaining standards. The rules existed so there would always be a reason, and the reason would always sound perfectly reasonable. Here is what you are actually walking into. The silverware. 9 courses, each with specific utensils. The official rule: work from the outside in. Simple enough. Except the fish knife didn't follow that logic. The oyster fork position varied by household. The asparagus tongs were a test specifically because they were rarely mentioned in etiquette books. Using them confidently meant you had encountered them before. Hesitating revealed exactly when you had entered this world. Nothing was said at the table. Everything was observed and discussed the following morning over tea. The calling card. An entire language that no school fully taught. A woman was required to leave her calling card within 3 days of being received for dinner. Day 4 was a quiet offense. Never leaving it was a declaration, but the card itself carried coded messages. Folding the upper right corner meant you had delivered it personally. A card left without any fold, sent by a servant, was either a deliberate insult or a sign you had never learned the difference. The women who knew used that difference constantly. Ladies of high position hired secretaries specifically to manage their calling card calendars. This was not considered excessive. It was considered responsible. The dinner conversation: you spoke to the guest on your right during the first course. When the hostess turned left, you turned left. If she didn't turn, you waited in silence. Acceptable topics: art, travel, theater. Unacceptable: money, illness, religion, politics, anything requiring a genuine opinion. The goal was not conversation. The goal was the performance of conversation. Substance was dangerous. Substance revealed where you had come from. The morning calendar. And this is where it becomes something else entirely. When someone in your family died, Victorian society had a precise schedule for your grief. A widow wore full black for 1 year and 1 day, then half mourning. Specific shades of gray, lavender, white, in specific combinations, for another year and a half. Leave mourning early. You were cold. Heartless. Stay too long. You were theatrical. Seeking attention. The acceptable window of grief was narrow, specific, and watched. The husband who lost his wife mourned for 3 months. No one questioned this. No one. These were not abstract rules. They ended real women's futures. The Times of London, 1879, Society column. A countess was observed eating at a dinner on Park Lane with her right glove still on. The detail was printed. Her name was printed. The story was referenced in society columns for the next 2 seasons. 1 glove, 2 years of consequences. Isabella Beaton, whose Book of Household Management sold over 60,000 copies in its first year, 1861, wrote this without irony. The mistress of a house is the last person who should appear to be working. Everything had to be perfect, and it had to appear effortless. The moment it appeared effortful, you had failed both tests simultaneously. The season itself was the machinery. Every year, May to July, London became a formal evaluation system for unmarried women. A young woman had approximately 3 seasons to secure a suitable match. After 3 seasons, the language around her shifted. The rules had not failed her. She had failed the rules. Presentation at court was the entry point. Dress recorded, curtsy recorded. The train, exactly 1 yard, not black. Flowers in the hair permitted. Tiara required for married women. Women practiced the curtsy for months. One woman, documented in the social records of 1881, caught her train on the door as she entered the throne room. She completed the presentation. She was never presented again. 1 door, 1 moment, gone. And then the rules changed, not by accident. What was correct in 1875 was subtly wrong by 1880. The society magazines published updates in language only legible to those already inside. A woman who had not kept up revealed herself immediately. Revealing yourself was the entire point of the exercise. This was not culture. This was commerce. The Victorian etiquette manual industry was worth millions. Mrs. Humphrey's Manners for Men, 1897, sold out its first edition in weeks. Etiquette schools charged fees equivalent to a year's salary for middle-class families. And they were careful about what they taught. Enough to make you functional. Never enough to make you certain. Certainty would have ended the business. The mourning industry is the most explicit example. Jay's Mourning Warehouse on Regent Street, London, maintained entire floors organized by mourning phase. Deep mourning, half mourning, secondary mourning. They advertised in women's magazines with the language of love and duty. Honor the memory of those you have lost. The emotional calendar of grief had been converted into a product catalog. Dressmakers had pricing tiers by mourning phase. Deep mourning generated the highest revenue. The system that told you how long to grieve was the same system selling you the clothes to grieve in. The finishing schools that charged fortunes to teach posture, speech, and movement taught exactly enough to make a woman believe she could learn to belong. Because the moment she fully believed she belonged, she would stop paying. The Victorian era ended. The rules disappeared. Except they did not. The system that used fish knives and calling cards to separate women did not dissolve. It adapted. The specific rules changed. The architecture remained. Create standards complex enough that those not born inside them will always stumble. Then build an industry selling the promise that they can learn their way in. The women who enforced Victorian etiquette most ruthlessly were almost always women who had once been judged by it. They had learned the system. They had paid the price of entry. And they were not going to make it easier for the next woman. That is not a Victorian problem. Victorian etiquette was never about manners. It was about who wrote the rules and who was measured by them. It was about turning behavior into social currency and making sure that currency was always slightly out of reach for the women who needed it most. If you had walked into that dinner in 1880 with the correct fork, the correct gloves, the correct arrival time, the correct topics of conversation, there would still have been something wrong. There was always something wrong. Because the goal was never your success. The goal was a system that always had a reason. If this video made you see the game differently, subscribe to the channel. And leave 1 word in the comments. Silverware. I want to know who stayed until the end and understood the real game.